Good morning or good afternoon, depending where you're joining us from. I'm Karen Seitz, the administrator for the Authentic Married Woman. I'm also a marriage coach and a mentor for women at a New Life Center, and I teach women how to be happy, essentially, so that they can turn their marriages around and have the relationship that they always wanted. And today I'm here with David Cope, one of the founders of a New Life Center. Welcome, David. Thanks for joining us again today.
Thank you, Karen. It's always a pleasure to share this talk with you. My name is David Cope. I'm a founder of a New Life Center with my partner, Peggy Litt. I got involved in relationships and how to have a loving and intimate relationship about more than 15 years ago when I got divorced after being married for 20 years and having four children. I realized I didn't want to be on my deathbed wishing that I had a loving and intimate relationship. So I spent a couple of years after my divorce doing a lot of soul searching and trying to read some books about how to have a loving and intimate relationship. And what I found when I went out to read the books was pretty much everything I was trying in my marriage that didn't actually work. So I had an epiphany that kind of seems obvious now that in order to having a loving and intimate relationship with another person, I have to have that loving and intimate relationship with myself. And I've been spending the last 15 years building a relationship with myself and with my partner Peggy, teaching other people how to build relationships with themselves so they can find their intimacy and the love that they're seeking from their partner within themselves, so they can be independent and healthy and coming to share that with their partners rather than from a place of neediness and dependency on their partner for their well-being and sense of happiness. So I'm happy to share. What is our topic today, Karen?
Well, we're gonna bust a myth today
Oh, wait.
on
I love
how
busting myths.
yeah, we've fallen under the illusion and have grown up thinking or being taught that somehow being in a relationship or getting married is gonna fix that feeling we have of being alone and lost. And so we're looking at today busting that myth that a marriage doesn't solve that problem. It can't fix that feeling of being lost and alone. And so we're going to talk about why we feel lost and alone in our marriage so we can see what the solution is.
Great.
Yeah,
Sounds like a good topic to talk about.
it
Because
is.
it's often over the 15 years I've been working with women and men, but one of the most common things that women tell me when they're in their marriages is I don't know who I am anymore. I'm
Yeah.
lost and I've lost my sense of self and my self identity. So really we're talking about today how does that happen?
Yeah.
And what's the solution to that problem? So Karen, can you talk about our three principles that
I
have to
can.
do with our
So,
Facebook group?
of course. So, we have a lot of new members. Welcome. We're so happy to have you. And one of the ways that we start these videos off is reminding all of you and the listeners and our members in our Facebook group of the three guiding principles that really support the framework of what we're teaching. Because as you probably noticed, we have a different perspective, and then what we're teaching is different than the other things out there to help solve the issues in a marriage. So, our first guiding principle is that you are responsible for your happiness, that happiness doesn't come from outside of us and other people or in other things. It comes from within, and we have to do the work to build and find that happiness within ourselves. Our second guiding principle is that the only person you can change is yourself. And a lot of us get caught up in the trap of thinking we need to change our husbands or
Mm,
that somehow our husbands are going to change us and fix all the problems in our marriage. And we get really trapped and feel
mm,
really stuck, like there's no way out. So if you're feeling stuck and need a way out, the answer is to focus on yourself, that you're the only person you have any control over to change.
mm,
The third guiding principle is that being an authentic married woman or being an authentic woman in general
mm.
is about having a relationship with yourself, knowing who you are, knowing what you like and don't like, doing the things that fill you up and make you happy, and
Mm,
feeling good about yourself.
mhm,
That those are the key ingredients to be an authentic married woman and to also be an authentic woman. And
mm,
this is the structure that we frame everything around, and that the perspective that we're teaching from, so you can empower yourself in your life to
mm,
change and have the marriage that you've dreamed of. It's
yeah.
also worth noting, for our new members, that what we're teaching and what we're sharing is meant to work in a very narrow framework and scope. That you are a woman, and that you know, or maybe think, you might have your walls up, and that you're with a good man. And a good man is a man who has good intentions at heart. He's hardworking, he's trustworthy, he's reliable and predictable. That's the man you married. He might be
Mm,
displaying other behaviors if you have your walls up, but that's the man you married. And if so, there is so much you can do to turn your marriage around. But
mm.
that's who we're here to serve. That's who these um, what we're teaching. That's who this applies to. If you're in any other kind of relationship, that's not what we're talking about. We're working in that narrow framework of being a
What other
woman
types of
with your walls
relationship
up.
what other types would you mean like
Being with a bad boy, meaning a man who is not those qualities of a good man, that from the beginning he's been maybe untrustworthy, unpredictable, um, emotionally unavailable, and closed off.
yeah,
That's what we mean by a bad boy.
yeah. So I think Karen, sometimes it gets confusing because when you say emotionally unavailable,
Mm,
most women think their husbands are emotionally unavailable.
that's true.
But I think what we're really saying is if the man that you married,
Mhm.
if you felt that he was a good man, and that's why you married him, as opposed to the man that you married, you knew, and your friends probably said, you probably shouldn't be with this guy. We don't think he's really good for you,
Yeah.
and you have a sense and have seen red flags about his behavior and you want to ignore. So we really want to make sure that it's about women with their walls up. And what does that mean, Karen?
Meaning, I'm holding my husband or the people in my life at arm's length,
Yeah.
and I'm I'm shielding myself and protecting myself from getting hurt, which means a lot of times as a woman and with my walls up. And that's why I teach this, because I know myself as that woman and I'm
Mm-hmm.
with a good man, and this is what I have applied to heal my marriage and grow and have a happy relationship with myself and my husband. Is that we often become what I call the ice queen. We're
Mm-hmm.
very cold, distant, closed off, angry, a lot of blame.
Yeah.
But we really think it's our husbands causing us
Mm-hmm.
to feel that way, but it's
Mm-hmm.
really our walls.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's very difficult without some help from a mentor or somebody who understands it. The mind gets very confused, thinking that you're, in this case, a woman with their walls up, that their husband is the source of unhappiness, and that if he would only change, then I'd be happy.
Yeah.
And that's very tricky because the mind really plays games. And the reason why the mind does that is because we don't want to look at ourselves. And that's part of putting our walls up. We don't want to look inside. We don't want to get hurt because it exposes us from the things that we've run and tried to protect ourselves because we feel vulnerable. And the mind is really tricky that we project onto our husbands as the source of our unhappiness. And today, when we talk about why we feel lost and alone in our marriages, it will help you realize that the source of your unhappiness is you. And the reason why you feel lost and alone is because that comes from inside of you, and nobody or the institution of marriage can make you feel not lost and alone,
Mm.
because you have to transform that as we teach, is building a relationship with them with yourself. So, Karen, can you talk about what's very common for women to go from one relationship and another, and what happens to their thinking of that a marriage or relationship will make them feel better about themselves and not alone in life.
Yeah. Well, kind of going back to what I was saying at the beginning of the our video today is that we live in this illusion thinking that a relationship with a man is going to make us happy somehow, that it's going to fill that emptiness or void that we
Hmm.
feel in ourselves and in our lives. And what we can't see, what we're not aware of, is that's coming from inside of us, just like
Hmm.
David was saying in our relationship with ourselves. But we get confused and we get lost and we can't see that. So we hop into a relationship or get into a relationship with a man. And maybe in the beginning, we feel all the new things, the butterflies, the chemistry. This is the one. I've
Hmm.
finally met the one. And then all of that wears off. And that empty feeling and that
Hmm.
alone feeling and that lost feeling all come creeping back in, but at this point we've lost ourselves. We've made our life all about our partner and gotten, this is me, this is my partner, and I've lost myself in the relationship and made it my everything. And when I do that, I don't have a sense of self. So I'm blaming my partner or blaming my husband for my emptiness and my aloneness and
Hmm.
how I'm feeling lost. So I think it's the relationship, so I end the relationship or the relationship ends. And now I'm on my own again and single. And that might be great for a little bit. Oh, I get to do all the things I couldn't
Hmm.
do in my relationship. I feel back to myself again.
Hmm.
I'm strong and independent. And that lasts for a little bit. And then those feelings of emptiness and feeling alone and feeling lost creep back in again, and I start looking for a relationship again. And that's
Hmm.
the cycle and the pattern that we stay on again and again and again, never resolving that feeling of lost and feeling alone is really coming from a lack of relationship with ourselves that never
Hmm.
gets healed because we're looking for the external relationship with our
Hmm.
partner or our husband to fix that, and they can't.
Yeah. Thank you, Karen. And
Yeah.
I was thinking in preparation for this call and top video today that often what happens when a woman is in a relationship and she breaks up with a man,
Hmm.
sometimes the pain of the breakup is so hard and so hurtful, which is why women over time put their walls up,
Yeah.
is because they don't want to feel that pain that we all feel when we break up and the hurt, and they rush into another relationship rather than being with themselves, and so they don't have to feel the pain. And that's another cycle that women
Yes.
get into is I don't want to feel the pain of being alone or the pain of not being with somebody or the pain of breaking up. So I distract myself and get into another relationship as quick as I can so I never have to feel anything. And the
Yeah.
problem is that what that does is it perpetuates this feeling of not wanting to feel and connect to ourselves. And that's where the lost and alone comes in, is because we never have time to heal the pain of the breakup and feeling an emptiness inside. And that period of time that could be used to heal ourselves and self-reflect is often our mind convinces us, I better get into another relationship, or as you said, I'm going to go be by myself. I don't need a man anymore until, and there's no sense, no time to heal and to reflect on ourselves, which is so important to building a relationship with ourselves. Karen, can you talk about also when women feel like they're lost and alone in their marriage, often it has to do with some of the reasons why they actually get married, because they have a foundation. They're starting off in a marriage for the wrong reasons, and they don't have a sense of commitment to themselves and to the marriage, because they're looking for an external reason of getting married, which isn't, I'm getting married because truthfully, I want a committed relationship and work hard to maintain it and to build that true foundation. What are some of the reasons we found that women actually get married?
Sure. And it's important with what I'm about to share. And you'll hear this throughout our videos that these are the things we do unconsciously,
Mm,
that we're not aware of. I thought that I was and convinced myself and didn't have any other way to know differently that I was getting married because I wanted that partnership and I wanted a committed relationship and a healthy marriage. Of course, we think that's why we're doing it, but then underneath all of that, that
mm,
story we're telling ourselves to cover up what would cause us to be exposed
mm,
and have to face that part of
mm,
us and work through it. Um, that there's things that are going on underneath that then, like David said, get in the way of us having that healthy partnership and growing and learning with
mm,
someone because we're getting into it unconsciously for the wrong reasons. And these are
mm.
some of
Okay.
those reasons that I have found in myself and then in working with many other women as well. So the first one is a lot of times unconsciously we get married because we don't want to be alone.
Mm,
So that's number one, and that shows up a lot. Another is we want someone to take care of us, or I want someone to take care of me, and give me security, whether that's um, emotional security or
mhm.
financial security.
And then that's also very confusing because often when working with women in relationship over the years, you'll have a very strong independent woman who says, I can take care of myself. I don't need a man. But on the flip side, in an unconscious way, they actually are in a relationship because they don't want the full burden of life and the financial aspect on their shoulders themselves, and they get into a relationship with a man to share that burden because that's too overwhelming, or I don't want the responsibilities of my life all on me. And it's an interesting dynamic that often the men that I work with say, I don't understand my wife. She wants to be independent, yet she also is scared of losing security, and that that our life, that something happens to me, that she'll be lost and have to do this all on her own, and it's very confusing.
Yeah, it is. The next one I have on our list is our biological clock is ticking.
Mm,
So I see this a lot with women that I work with in their late 20s and early 30s, where they know they want to have kids and they haven't
mm,
met someone yet and start to get in a panic and want to get
yeah,
married because they feel that time slipping away to have
yeah.
kids. Another reason is wanting to have children,
Hmm.
getting married for that reason. It's almost, and that was my experience too with my husband. It was almost like he was the necessary pawn in the
Mm,
game to get to that end result of having children. Another reason is we think it's what we're supposed to do. This is the natural next step. This is what we do when we grow up and are in a relationship. We get married, so this is what I should do.
mhm,
And then the last we have on our list is often feeling like we won't be a real woman, or I'll never know myself as a woman if I don't get married and have kids, is one we see very often.
and thank you, Karen. And all of these reasons are very normal, and we
Mhm.
over the 15 years I've been working with women in relationship, all of these come up all the time, and it's really important. Karen, can you normalize this so it's not
Yeah,
like I know you said it's unconscious, but it's
yeah.
this is so common that how would you normalize this?
We we tend to, in our humanness, want to beat ourselves up for these
Mm,
kinds of things.
yeah.
Um, and or we don't want to see them, so we bury them really deep
Mhm,
so we don't have to face them and feel that vulnerability or face that part of ourselves and risk feeling that emotional pain.
mhm,
And what I have found in working with hundreds of women is that these things are in us, and it's when we're willing to look at them and have the
mhm,
courage to look underneath and say, is maybe this is in me, and just being honest with yourself that allows you to see it and actually move forward and let that go. So you
Mm-hmm.
give your relationship with yourself and with your husband a chance to heal and a
Mm-hmm.
chance to be something wonderful and what you've always dreamed of. So we see these things again and again and again, and pulling them up and looking at them isn't to make ourselves bad or wrong or beat ourselves up in any way. It's so we can actually face that part of us and move in another direction and change so that that's not running our lives. And it's just how our mind works that these things go on inside of us. It's just our humanness.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I think, part of what makes what we're doing and what we're teaching so different. Is before I found this way, I was always just thinking positive things and just put a smile on my face and just be happy and pretend like everything is great. Just feel good about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And those things never work because they covered up what was really going on the inside. And it seemed so counterintuitive that to actually be happy, to actually feel good about myself, that I had to dig underneath the surface and find those kind of icky things that I hadn't wanted to see. But that's what makes what we're doing so empowering and works so well. Because when we see those things, we actually can let them go. They're not the scary monsters in the closet anymore.
Thank you, Karen.
Yeah.
And so in the segue into the next part, we thought we'd talk about two types of self identities where it's very common for women to lose themselves.
Yeah.
So can you talk about what a self identity is and why, as women in these self identities, they lose themselves and they don't know who they are anymore? Because it's, as we said, it's so common for a woman to say, I've lost myself. I don't know who I am anymore. What, how does self identities and the way we work with them, why is that so impactful?
Of course. So, one of the things that's different about what we do is we really understand the mind and the mechanics of the mind and how it works.
Mm-hmm.
And what we understand about the mind, and that's different than the brain. The brain has the capacity to create what we call a mind, is that its fundamental nature of the mind is that it's void and it's empty. And we can't stand that experience of ourselves as humans and abhor that and how we just work in our humanness. It's just how we're wired. I often tell my clients, I don't know why we're made the way that we're made. I just know these things to be true, and it works
Mm-hmm.
when we understand it. Is that in our humanness, we look for things and people and roles to give us identity of who we are because the mind is fundamentally void and empty. So there's no inherent self in the mind.
Mm-hmm.
We understand that the self, our true self, is more of our heart or our soul or that core part of who we are, but it's not the mind. And so the mind creates attachments to the external world to give us meaning and purpose about who we are. And that's where we create self
Mm-hmm.
identities. So I might have a self identity as being, we're going to talk about two main ones as they relate to marriage, but I might have a self identity in being a daughter, or I get self identity through my career or through my friends and through my hobbies. And that's how I know myself and define myself.
Mm-hmm.
And without those things, I don't know who I am because that's where I'm getting my sense of self and who I am.
Yeah, beautiful. So that was really clear. Thank you, Karen.
Mhm.
Can you talk about the two big ones
Yep.
for women in getting lost in these self identities?
Yeah. So the biggest self identities we get lost in a marriage are being a mom, of course, and also in being a wife. And again, just emphasizing this is normal. It's not bad. It's not wrong. It's just what happens in our humanness. But when we can understand it, we can transform ourselves and our lives in really incredible ways and
Mm-hmm.
be show up as a mom and a wife in a genuine, authentic, real way that is so much more fulfilling and rewarding than
Mm-hmm.
trying to show up as a mom or a wife to get your identity through those things.
Yeah. So the opposite of having let's say a wife as a
Mhm.
self identity, an authentic wife would not identify herself as a wife. It would be, so like for you, Karen, you're married. Your wife is. I'm Karen. I know who I am, and I am a wife.
Yes.
I'm married to a man, which makes me a wife, but the the wife doesn't define you as a person. That you define yourself separate from the self identity, and you know who you are. But what happens in the way the mind works is we become our self identity. I know myself as a wife, and I lose myself in the self identity. There is no me. There's no, in this case, there's no Karen that exists when you become a wife. And when you become a wife, what happens is your mind tells you there isn't any me. I don't know who I am anymore. I become a wife. And then what happens as a wife, you feel like you've subordinated yourself to your husband. You've given away all your power to him, and you feel like that there's no you anymore. So what it feels like when you become your self identity, it feels like I don't know who I am anymore, and I've given my power and my identity over to my husband as a wife, and it makes me feel powerless. But but the truth of the experience is that it's when we create our self identities and lose ourselves that makes us feel that way. So what we're teaching in our program is how not to lose yourself and to stay defined and true to yourself and authentic, in your case, as Karen, who
Yeah.
happens to be a wife, which means that you're married to a man who's a husband, or if you're in um, a, a relationship where you're of the same gender, sometimes they have the same identities. But the key is not to lose yourself. When you lose yourself in your self identity, you feel lost and alone because there is no you. And the same thing as a mother or a mom. Often women say, I don't know who I am. My whole life is centered around my children, and everything I do is for them. And I'm driving around in a minivan or driving around everywhere for my kids, and I don't know who I am anymore. Well, that's that self identity which we lose ourselves in, and rather than being Karen, who is a mother and has children, where you have a sense of self, what happens in a self identity, we lose ourselves in our self identity as a mother, and then we feel oppressed, and we feel like we don't have our life, and that somehow somebody has taken that away from us because we've lost ourselves, and we think it's our marriage, and we think it's our husband or our children that's causing us to feel this oppression or a loss of ourselves. But it's really because we never had our sense ourself, and we gave away ourself. And we talk about being intertwined in our marriages and our children, so we don't have any self identity of who we are. So, Glenn Close in her she won Best Actress in the Golden Globes and had a wonderful speech, and she talked about making sure as women that we have a sense of we maintain our dreams and our personal fulfillments, and we have a place to achieve our goals, and that only happens when we identify ourselves separate from our self identities as a wife or as a mother or as in our career, and then we know who we are, and we can fulfill our dreams and have our own fulfillment because we know who we are. If we've lost ourselves, we feel lost and alone, and we've given ourselves away to our self identities and know who we are. All of a sudden, we wake up one day and feel like somebody's taking it away from us, and we've lost our dreams and our sense of fulfillment.
Well,
So
and or go ahead.
no, it's okay. I've been
Yeah.
talking too much.
I was going to say another point in that, on spinning off what David was saying, is that we begin to put everyone before us to get
Yes,
that self identity fulfilled. So I'm going to we talk about this a lot. So here's me, here's my husband, or here's me, and here's my kids. And I get lost in them. I make everything about me, about them. So I'm
yeah,
putting them above me,
yeah,
trying to get back
yeah,
what I'm hoping to get back by being that perfect wife or being that perfect mom. And it doesn't happen because nothing and no one can make us happy. We have to find that within ourselves. But what ends up happening and how the mind works is we become really resentful
Mm.
or angry and have a lot of blame because we can't see that it's been our choice on an unconscious level to put our husband before us, to put our kids before us. Um, and we get lost in that and can't see we've been making those choices, and that the
Yeah, right.
solution is
Mm.
to start putting myself first in a healthy way, and so that I have plenty to give and I can show up in those
Mhm.
relationships and not feel resentful and not feel angry or bitter.
Yeah, thank you. So the opposite of being an authentic married woman is being lost in your self-identity, not knowing who you are. An authentic married woman is grounded in the truth of who she is, and stays um, focused on fulfilling herself or fulfilling herself, not in a selfish way, but putting herself first in a constructive, healthy way. So she's filling her own cup and has plenty to give, and is defining herself, as opposed to giving yourself away and putting everybody else first and losing yourself in your self identities, which makes you feel lost and alone because there is no me. There is no me in the loss when I lose myself in my self identities, which why you feel lost and alone in your marriage is because there's no me. So the solution is, as we teach in our um, strategy, is to find yourself again, to recreate your self identity, to let go of the attachments and find yourself and build a healthy, true relationship with your husband and your children, or your in your life, by fundamentally putting yourself first in a very healthy and constructive way.
Yeah, and then what happens is those relationships heal and become so much
Yeah,
healthier because you're just showing up as yourself,
yeah, yeah,
and you're with a good man and you've got wonderful children, and you can just accept them for who they are and not
right,
want them to be anything or anyone else, because you're fully accepting yourself and you have your back and your relationship with
yeah,
yourself. So it allows you to show up in those relationships in a totally new way, that
hmm,
you're not putting expectations on those relationships or wanting them to change. You can truly love them and accept them for who they are, and
yeah,
that's
yeah,
really a
yeah.
healthy relationship.
And because you love and accept yourself because you put yourself first and haven't lost yourself. So,
Yeah,
Karen, can you kind of give an overview of what our talk was today? It was
sure.
why we feel lost and alone in our marriage.
Of course. So what we're really emphasizing today is what we what we know, just I know in working with myself and in working with other women and men too, um, is that when we're not in a relationship, we feel lost and alone. And then we get in a relationship and eventually we feel lost and alone.
Mm,
That the relationship can't solve that experience of ourselves. And when we're putting that expectation for it to solve our emptiness or our lostness and feeling alone, then we put so many expectations on it and we end up just feeling alone and lost again. And so we have to
and
realize,
miserable and
and
unhappy.
miserable, unhappy, and we put
Yeah,
our walls up
yeah,
because we think it's our partner doing that to us. And then we maybe get out of that relationship and get into a new one, and we have that experience over and over and over again. So what we have to realize is that we feel alone and we feel lost in ourselves, that it's an internal
mm,
experience because we don't have a relationship with ourselves, and we get lost in our different self identities in life, like being a mom or being a wife. And we wake up one day and it's like, where did I go? Who
yeah,
am I? And that's why we feel lost and alone, because we have to build that relationship with
mm,
ourselves, and then we can show up already fulfilled and happy within ourselves and show up in our marriage or show up in our relationships with our kids. And then we don't feel alone and lost anymore because we have ourselves. And
we have our
that's
back.
what we're talking about today.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Thank you,
So
Karen. That was wonderful.
great. Well, thank you for coming on, and to all of our viewers and listeners today. If You know that you are stuck in your marriage feeling lost and alone, and you've tried all the books and you've tried marriage counseling and you've tried all the things and nothing has worked and you're still stuck in that place and you're ready for a new way and ready to explore how you have your walls up and how that might be pushing your husband away and
Mm,
creating the problems in your marriage. I would love to talk and have a conversation with you, and we'll get really crystal clear on what's really going on in your marriage, not the stories you might be stuck in, help you to see how you can turn things around and the things you do have control over to change. And
mm,
then if we can help you take that next step and solve these issues, then we'll talk about how. If not, that's okay too. It will be an incredibly valuable
mm.
conversation, and I would love to talk and get to know you and see what's going on and help you see a way out. So you can private message me and we'll set up a time. And thank you so much for watching, David. Thank you for
Thank you,
being on the
Karen.
show today.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure to share this with you, and it's lovely to know that you're a true teacher doing this in your own marriage and sharing this with so many women that you work with that are transforming their lives and seeing things in a whole new way that it's very exciting to be part of this. And thank you for being you, and thank you to our listeners. I hope everybody has a lovely day,
All
and
right.
goodbye.
Bye. Thank you.